Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm changing out the front passenger side knuckle on the 2002 Honda Civic. So stay tuned and you'll see how I get it done. So first thing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have to get this big axle nut off, and to get that done, we have to stick something in the rotor. This is how I get these off. I stick a punch in the rotor, and whenever I'm turning this nut that way, it wedges itself in here and it's able to be loosened. So we're gonna have to take that off. I'm actually gonna need to get these screws out, which sometimes are a pain. And let's see, we're gonna take the brake line off. We're gonna have to take the shock loose and take the caliper off. And my favorite is right there, that ball joint. The reason why we're changing out the knuckle is because that ball joint is bad. Okay, so I want to place this here because whenever I turn the bolt, it's gonna wedge itself there. So if I take the caliper off first, I won't be able to do that. So here we go. Here's the big wrench. What I've done is I've hammered this open a little bit. Sorry about the lawnmower sound, but I've hammered this open a little bit, so hopefully it will turn. Sometimes these are a real pain, so let's see. And it works. All right, see how this worked? That wedged it in there. I've also checked to see if these screws are loose, and they are. Sometimes you're gonna need to get a hammer driver on those things. Uh-oh, it's starting to turn again, so I'm gonna keep it in here as I turn that nut off. All right, spinning it off. I got a new nut from the junkyard, so it'll be able to go on the new. It's going to go on the old axle, but here's the old nut. But in order to take this knuckle off, we're going to need to get this rotor off. We're going to need to get the caliper off, and all that's coming up next. Okay, so I'm going to get the caliper off now. The caliper is going to be a 15, I believe a 15, no, it's a 17 millimeter. So I'm going to go around the back here. I'm going to go around the back and bust the initial torque off of here. So I go around, be careful of the brake hoses. Then I'm going to bust the torque on that one, which I did. And I'm going to go underneath and bust the torque on the big bottom one too. Sometimes you got to get creative with how you break these torques. I'm going to go underneath the car and push it up. There we go. I broke the torque on that one. All right, got the torque broke on those. I'm also going to break the torque on these as well, the ones that hold the knuckle onto the shock, or the strut, or whatever. All right, so I'm going to bust the torque on this one. Broke the torque on that. Next, I'll break the torque on this one. Okay, so they're moving. All right, lastly, before we start doing a bunch of other pounding and things like that, I'm going to get the cotter key out of that. I'm going to loosen it up, and I'm going to bang. I'm going to bang with a hammer right here. And what that's going to do is it's going to send shock waves in here, and it's going to loosen up that ball joint. Okay, I took the cotter key out, and now I'm just spinning. I'm spinning this castellated nut off just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bang on it with a hammer. all around it. Okay, so I've taken the caliper bolts out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the caliper off, and I'm going to set it very gently over here. I don't want to hurt that hose. So always keep something like this in your garage, something about this high, to where when you take a caliper off, you don't have to pinch any hoses or anything like that. So now I have working room. What I'm also going to do now is I'm going to take this rotor off. And to do that, you take the two little set screws out. All they do is keep it from rattling, really, and it helps with assembly. Sometimes those are in there real good. So these two were okay. Now I'm gonna pull that off. All right, set the rotor aside. Try not to get any oils on it or anything like that. Okay, so now we have. I used a ball peen hammer, and I banged on. I hammered on the bottom right here. I hammered on this. I hammered on this. I'm sending shockwaves in here. I'm not seeing any kind of movement yet, but usually the movement happens whenever I take these two bolts out. So I'm going to take those two bolts out now. Okay, with plenty of banging, I was able to get this ball joint. I was able to get this ball joint out of here. Look how bad this thing is. See that? It won't even stand up to its own weight. This thing was making all kinds of noise every time I'd go over a bump. So we're gonna swap it out with another one, a knuckle. So stand by while I prepare everything, and I'm gonna grease the new ball joint. Okay, so here we go. Got everything greased up. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set the ball joint in first. Then I'm gonna line up the spline shaft for the CV axle. So here we go. Dropped it in. I dropped it in its home. Now I'm gonna put the castellated nut on to where it doesn't try to come out whenever I'm manipulating it. All right, put it on a couple turns. Make sure it goes on. Don't force it. Make sure it's not cross threaded. All right, so it's on there. Now, time to place the spline shaft in the knuckle. There we go. Give it a wiggle. Give it a wiggle, and it'll pop through just like it did there. Now, next thing we'll do is I'm going to line this up good enough to put one of these bolts or both bolts in the top. So I have both bolts here. Sometimes you need a jack in order to do that, but we'll see. Okay, so it lined up pretty good. Sometimes you need a jack to push it up, but let's get it on. All right, it worked. Hey. I think one of these ideally should go one way and the other one should go the other way. There we go. Got them both in there. Got them stabbed. We're going to put the hardware on there loosely. All right, it's on there. I'm also going to put this axle nut on loosely. So that it doesn't move. I'm also going to put the sensor back on there. I forgot to tell you guys about the sensor earlier. Place a sensor in its little sensor carrier there and find the hardware for it, which it's a little guy like this big. And we'll place that. We'll place that in later, okay? We'll place that in later. Now, next thing is, let's go ahead and tighten these down. We're not going to tighten them all the way because I do want a little bit of, what do you call it, weight on the car. I want weight on the car when I tighten those down. So those will be last, but I am going to cinch them down almost all the way. Let's use a ratchet for that. All right, they've been cinched down. There's enough room for them to, or there's enough play for them to move a little bit if they need to. Let's see. We're gonna need the rotor on there, but I'm looking at these. I'm looking at these lug nuts, seeing if I can. Okay, they're gonna be all right. I also want to put the rotor back on, but these little holes, I gotta make sure that these holes are good, because I don't want them to be seized in there either, but I don't want them to back themselves out either. So I'm going to place a little bit, of, I don't have any anti-seize on me. So what I'll do is I'll use a little bit of this grease, just a tiny bit, and I'll put it on the threads of these two screws. They're not in real big danger of being backed out anyway, because as the wheel is holding, as the lug nuts are holding the wheel, they keep these screws nice and flush. So we'll put the we'll go ahead and put the rotor on now. Lining up the two holes. See these two holes? I also have two recessed holes for the rotor. And once I place these in here, they will hold the rotor in place. Nice. They don't need to be really tight, but give it a good tug with the screwdriver. All right, got that on. What we can do is go ahead and put the caliper back on, making sure we're not going to twist anything. Carefully put the caliper on. Locate the caliper bolts, which are here. There's one. Okay, these are okay to get tight. I will tighten that real good and tight with the extension. Let's go ahead and do that. Got that. And on the other side, or the bottom one. No extension required. Okay, it's tight, but let's give it a little extra with the extension. Didn't work. Let's turn the wheel a little bit, get some better leverage. There we go. That's tight. Good. You want those brake caliper bolts really tight. Let's go ahead and place our, you know what, we're gonna keep, no, you know what, we'll put the hose hardware on. Why not? That's the wrong hose hardware. Got that. And let's move this here. All right, I got the sensor on, and as you can see, kind of loose still, and I still have some, I have still a lot of way to go on this, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this nut on. And notice how it's kind of fighting me? What you can do again is place that punch on the other side this time, and feel free to turn. Oh, there it goes. It stopped. Now the way we're gonna get this really tight is we're gonna put the wheel on, we're gonna lower it, and then we're gonna tighten it. And that way you don't need to have somebody pushing on the brake. You don't have a worry about the car coming off the jack stands, all that. So that is almost tight. Next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna place the tire on the ground again for the last step of tightening these two bolts. Because as you can see, it's loose and you can hear it also. Okay, so as you can see, I've placed the wheel on the hub. I'm gonna lower it, which puts weight on the car. It's gonna do two things for me. It's gonna allow my shock to be in the right spot. And it's also going to allow me, now if you notice, I kept the hub, I took the hub ring out of the center of the wheel so I can finish tightening. I'm going to finish tightening this. So let's do that right now. All right, I'm tightening. I think it's like 200 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench, but that's gonna be pretty good. That's gonna be real good. All right, so the big ones are gonna be 19 in the back for the shock, 19 millimeter wrench, and 19 millimeter socket. Okay, so I got it tight. It's not 100% tight. I have it set. The two bolts on the shock absorber, I have them set. I have them tight to where they won't move. But I have to do two things. I have to do two things inside here. And one of them is to bend the tab here to keep this nut from backing off. It's not gonna back off, but that's one of the things we have to do. And the last thing is to tighten those two bolts on the strut or shock or whatever. Somebody tell me in the comments which one is which, shock or strut. I think this is a strut actually, because the shock is independent and it has its own, it has a spring somewhere else. I think that's what that is. All right. Okay. So first things first, I'm gonna bend this tab. It's tight, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give it a little bit of a jab. I'm gonna aim this punch at it, and I'm gonna give it, just kind of dent it in a little bit like that. It doesn't need to be all the way in. It just needs to be, if it loosens a bit, it's gonna catch on that little notch. And lastly, these two bolts have to be tight. So I'm gonna tighten those right now. So I've tightened it up. And again, I thank you guys for watching this channel. I just fix it myself. And, you know, I started this channel so that, you know, regular people can do this job, or all these jobs I'm showing you. Basically, I got another hub at the junkyard because the other one had a bad ball joint. And it's easier just to change, in my opinion, it's easier to change the hub out with one that looks good rather than trying to press out the ball joint and all kinds of stuff. So I'm trying to save you guys some cash. So basically today, you know, I don't know, I've never had this job quoted, but you know, just the hub itself, if somebody's gonna take that out, change out the ball joints are like 80 bucks, 60 bucks. You know, and I only spent $39 for that hub assembly. It's called a knuckle. I spent $39 for that, and it included the ball joint. It's a moved ball joint. It's re-greasable. I might even go back because there was some performance polyurethane bushings on all the suspension components. So I might go back and get all that stuff. But anyway, I want to save you guys money. So today I probably saved, you know, how much would this job be at a shop? I would say a safe bet would be $600 for a shop to do this. All right, but you know, correct me if I'm wrong. You know, I don't know how many hours this job pays out, but it's probably around 600 bucks. I think that's a conservative estimate. All right, there's the last thing right there. But anyway, when I set this thing back down, I'm gonna finish torquing those lug nuts, and I'm gonna take it for a test drive, see how it drives, because it was knocking. It was going ba-bung, 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 making a sound like that every time I hit a bump. So it wasn't eating up the tires or anything like that. It was just annoying. It was a thump, so or a knocking sound on the right side of the car. All right, again, thanks for joining us. See you next time.